The stars beyond the viewport glittered like distant diamonds, but the oppressive silence on the bridge of the Vanguard told another story. Captain Alyssa Greer stood at the command console, her hands clenched behind her back, eyes locked on the swirling mass of signals flashing across the radar. They'd been exploring this uncharted star system for days, and now, something had found them. "Unknown vessels, Captain? They're closing fast." Lieutenant Mason Cole's voice was calm but laced with urgency. His fingers danced over the weapons control panel as the tension in the room thickened. "How many?" Alyssa asked, her voice steady, though her mind raced. "At least a dozen," Mason replied, glancing her way, the corner of his mouth tightening. "And they're big." Alyssa's heartbeat quickened, but she kept her face neutral. No need to show concern, yet. "Maintain course. Open a communication channel. Let's see if they want to talk." A soft chime signaled the connection attempt, but there was no reply from the alien vessels. They continued their approach, unwavering and silent. The Vanguard was fast, but these ships were faster. "Still nothing," Mason reported, his tone sharpening. "They're ignoring us." At the science station, Dr. Liara Blake's fingers flew over her controls, her brow furrowed in thought. "Captain, the ship's configurations are unlike anything we've encountered. They're too advanced to be local to this region of space." She paused, her curiosity evident. "We may be dealing with an empire, one that considers us an intruder." Alyssa's jaw tightened. The Vanguard had been sent to explore the far reaches of the galaxy, not engage in hostile first contact. Yet here they were, caught between the stars and a potential alien threat. "Lieutenant," Alyssa said, her voice cutting through the tension, "prepare defensive systems, but hold fire. We don't want to provoke them." Mason hesitated, his hand hovering over the weapons panel. "And if they provoke us first?" "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Alyssa replied, her eyes flicking to the radar as the alien fleet drew nearer. Her gut told her this wasn't a casual meeting. The alien ships appeared on the main screen, sleek and predatory, their black hulls reflecting nothing but the cold void. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding the Vanguard like wolves circling prey. "Incoming transmission," Mason announced, surprise in his voice. "On screen," Alyssa ordered. The image that filled the screen was unsettling. A towering alien figure stared back at them, its skin a shimmering metallic hue, its eyes dark and unblinking. The alien spoke in a deep, guttural language, harsh and unintelligible. As the translator kicked in, the meaning became clear. "Surrender or be annihilated." Mason's hand hovered over the weapons control again, this time with more intent. "That sounds like a provocation to me, Captain." Alyssa exhaled slowly, her mind racing. They couldn't outgun these ships, not with the Vanguard's limited firepower. But running wasn't an option either. If this empire saw humans as a threat now, they'd never stop hunting them. "Lieutenant," Alyssa said quietly, "stand by. We need to think this through." Dr. Blake looked up from her station, her voice calm but firm. "Captain, their ships may be more advanced, but I've noticed something. There's a fluctuation in their energy signatures. Their shields aren't stable. They may rely on overwhelming power, but that could be a weakness." Alyssa turned to her, hope stirring amidst the tension. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "If we can isolate the fluctuation pattern, we might be able to disrupt their shields. It would give us a narrow window to strike, if it comes to that," Liara explained, her voice steady but charged with the urgency of the moment. Alyssa nodded, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and possibly outmatched. But humans had been underestimated before, and more than once they had defied the odds. The alien leader's voice broke through the calm again, colder and more menacing this time. "This is your final warning. Surrender or be destroyed." Alyssa's eyes narrowed. She glanced at Mason, then at Dr. Blake. "Prepare the disruption, Doctor," she ordered, her tone firm. "But hold fire. We'll give them one last chance to stand down." Mason grinned, his fingers itching on the trigger. "I hope they don't take it, Captain." Alyssa turned back to the screen, her expression unreadable. "This is Captain Alyssa Greer of the Vanguard. We don't want to fight, but if you insist, we won't go down quietly." For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines and the steady beep of the radar, as the alien ships hovered, their intentions clear. The silence was suffocating, the tension unbearable. And then, without warning, the alien ships opened fire. The Vanguard shuddered violently as the alien salvos slammed into its shields. Alarms blared through the bridge, and the deck trembled beneath Captain Alyssa Greer's boots. Her hands tightened around the armrest of her command chair, her eyes locked on the tactical display, where the alien ships converged like a pack of predators. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to exterminate. "Shields holding at 60%. Mason shouted over the chaotic noise, his fingers flying across the console. "But we can't take another hit like that." Alyssa's pulse raced, but her voice remained steady. "Liara, how long until we can disrupt their shields?" Dr. Blake's voice crackled through the comms from engineering. "I'm working as fast as I can. I need more time to fine-tune the frequencies. 5 minutes, maybe less." Alyssa didn't have 5 minutes. The alien ships were already repositioning, preparing for another barrage. She glanced at Mason, whose jaw was set in grim determination, waiting for her orders. "Return fire," she said coldly. "Give them something to think about." Mason grinned, his fingers tapping the controls. The Vanguard's cannons roared to life, beams of concentrated plasma streaking across the void. Several of the enemy ships evaded easily, but one took a direct hit, its shields flaring bright before the vessel spun away, wounded but not destroyed. "They're tough," Mason muttered, his grin fading. "We need that disruption fast." Alyssa's gaze flicked to the alien ships on the screen. They moved with unnerving precision, adapting to the Vanguard's attack patterns. These weren't mindless drones. They were calculating, intelligent, and relentless. And they were closing in for the kill. "Captain?" Dr. Blake's voice cut through the tension. "I've got the disruption signal ready. Transmitting now." On the tactical display, the alien ships faltered. Their movements, once smooth and coordinated, became erratic as their shields flickered, destabilized by the frequency disruption. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Now, Mason!" Alyssa barked. The Vanguard's cannons fired again, this time with devastating precision. Plasma beams sliced through weakened shields, hitting critical points on 2 of the alien ships. One exploded in a brilliant flash of light, while the other drifted, powerless, its hull breached. "Direct hit!" Mason shouted, unable to hide the triumph in his voice. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining alien ships adjusted, recovering from the disruption faster than expected. They reformed their attack pattern, converging on the Vanguard once more. "They're learning," Alyssa muttered, her brow furrowing. She had hoped the shield disruption would give them more time, but the aliens were adapting too quickly. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was a test, and humanity was being weighed. "We can't keep this up," Mason warned, the tension in his voice palpable. "Their next wave will tear us apart." Alyssa knew he was right. The Vanguard was a scout ship, not a war vessel. They could hold off a few enemies, but this many? Their odds were slim, and getting worse by the second. Her mind raced, considering their options. They could flee, but the alien ships were faster. They could continue fighting, but it would only delay the inevitable. And surrender? That was never an option. Then, an idea struck her, desperate, risky, but it might be their only chance. "Mason, prepare to overload the reactor," she said quietly. His head snapped toward her, eyes wide. "Overload? Captain, that'll knock out everything within 100 kilometers," she finished. "Including us. But it'll take them down too." Mason hesitated, understanding the gravity of her order. Overloading the reactor would turn the Vanguard into a bomb, disabling the alien ships, but it would leave them stranded, powerless, and vulnerable to whatever followed. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. Alyssa's eyes were steely as she met his gaze. If we don't do this, they'll destroy us. This is our best shot. Mason nodded grimly, turning to his console. Reactor overload in progress. We've got about 60 seconds once I hit the switch. Alyssa opened a channel to the entire ship. All hands brace for impact. We're overloading the reactor to take down the enemy fleet. Prepare for immediate power loss. This is not a drill. The bridge crew stiffened, but there were no protests. They knew the stakes. Alyssa watched as the alien ships moved in, oblivious to the trap being laid. Ready, Captain, Mason said, his finger hovering over the final control. Alyssa took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision. She knew what this meant: no shields, no weapons, and no way to run. But if they survived, they'd have a chance to fight another day. Do it! Mason pressed the button, and the lights on the bridge flickered. The hum of the engines grew louder, a low, ominous roar building as the reactor began to overload. The alien ships were almost on them now, their weapons primed, ready to deliver the final blow. And then everything went white. The blinding white light faded, leaving only silence in its wake. Captain Alyssa Greer blinked against the residual glare, her heart pounding as she strained to hear anything: an alarm, a voice, the low hum of the ship's systems. But there was nothing. The Vanguard floated, dead in the void. Report, she commanded, her voice barely louder than a whisper, but it cut through the quiet like a blade. Mason, shaken but focused, pulled himself back to his console. Reactors offline. We're floating with minimal auxiliary power. He tapped a few buttons, his brow furrowing. Shields are down, and the enemy ships. Tell me, Alyssa urged, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. They're gone, Captain. Mason's voice was filled with disbelief. All of them. The overload wiped out their systems. No readings from any of their ships. Relief washed over the bridge like a tidal wave. A few quiet cheers broke the tension, but Alyssa remained still, her gaze fixed on the view beyond the shattered remains of their attackers. It had worked. Her gamble had paid off. But now, they were drifting defenseless. Liara Blake's voice crackled over the comms from engineering, her tone weary but intact. Reactors fried, Captain? It'll take time to bring it back online. How much time? Alyssa asked. At least 2 hours. We're running on fumes. Life support is functional, but we've got limited resources until we get main power back. Alyssa nodded, processing the information. 2 hours. They could survive that, as long as no more surprises lurked out there. She stood, steadying herself on the armrest, her mind already racing ahead. Mason, scan the area. I want to know if we're alone out here. Mason worked quickly, his fingers gliding over the console. After a tense moment, he shook his head. No other ships detected within our immediate range, Captain. Seems like it's just us. Alyssa exhaled, but the weight in her chest didn't lift. Victory came at a cost, and now they were vulnerable. Any distress signal could attract unwanted attention, and if the aliens came back before they had power, there would be no second chances. Maintain a low profile, she ordered. We don't broadcast anything unless absolutely necessary. If anyone's out there listening, we don't want them to know we're crippled. Mason nodded, acknowledging the gravity of their situation. The Vanguard was little more than a sitting duck without its reactor. Understood. Silent running it is. Alyssa walked over to the viewport, staring at the vast, empty expanse of space. The remnants of the alien ships drifted like debris from a forgotten war, and the cold stars seemed distant, indifferent. She felt the responsibility of her crew's survival weigh heavily on her shoulders. The quiet stretched on, but it wasn't peaceful. There was a tension that couldn't be shaken. The crew busied themselves with repairs, trying to restore some semblance of order, but Alyssa knew that this calm wouldn't last. Liara's voice returned, a bit sharper now. Captain, I think you should come down here. There's something you need to see. Alyssa exchanged a look with Mason before turning toward the lift. On my way. Mason, keep monitoring our surroundings. The short journey to engineering felt endless. When the doors opened, The sight of the charred reactor and the crew's exhausted faces confirmed how much they had been through. Liara met her at the entrance, wiping sweat from her brow with a dirty sleeve. "What's going on?" Alyssa asked, her eyes scanning the room. Liara led her to a terminal where a holographic image of the reactor's core pulsed weakly. "It's not just the overload. There's damage that wasn't from our blast, external interference, something that messed with our systems even before we triggered the explosion." Alyssa's heart skipped a beat. "You're saying the aliens sabotaged us?" Liara shook her head. "Not quite. It's more sophisticated than that. It's almost like they were studying us, feeding data directly from our systems." Alyssa felt a chill creep down her spine. The battle had been a test, a probe, but this revelation suggested something far worse. They hadn't just been trying to destroy the Vanguard, they had been learning. "What does that mean for us now?" Alyssa asked, her voice tight. "It means," Liara said grimly, "we might not be out of danger yet." Alyssa stared at the flickering core, her mind racing. If the aliens had been collecting data, it was only a matter of time before they returned, and when they did, they'd be prepared. "We need to get the reactor back online. Fast," she said, urgency tightening her voice. "And we need to be ready when they come back." The tension in the room thickened, but there was no fear, only resolve. They had survived this long. Now they had to be smarter, faster, and stronger than the enemy that was undoubtedly watching. The Vanguard shuddered violently as the reactor roared back to life, a throaty growl echoing through the ship. Alyssa Greer stood at the helm, heart racing with the thrum of energy surging through the vessel. Around her, the bridge crews sprang to action, screens lighting up with fresh data and diagnostics. They were alive, but the reality of their situation loomed heavier than ever. "Status report!" Alyssa barked, her voice cutting through the bustling chaos. Mason, still tethered to his console, looked up, urgency etched across his face. "Reactor stable, Captain, but we've got incoming signals. Multiple ships, scans show they matched the previous alien vessels." The crew's relief evaporated like morning mist. Alyssa's stomach twisted. They were not just returning, they were organized. "Liara, how long until we're combat ready?" she asked, her voice firm despite the dread gnawing at her insides. "We can engage weapon systems in about 15 minutes, but targeting will be slow without the mainframe fully operational," Liara replied, her fingers flying over her terminal. "Make it 10, Alyssa insisted, clenching her fists. The time for preparation was gone, the moment to act was now. As the crew rallied to prepare the ship, Alyssa's mind churned with thoughts of their previous encounter. The aliens had demonstrated their intelligence, their adaptability. She could not afford to underestimate them again. Just then, the comms crackled, and a familiar voice came through. "Captain, I've got something!" It was Kelly, their communications officer, her excitement palpable. "I intercepted their communications. They're discussing their tactics and a strategy to neutralize us." Alyssa felt a spark of hope. "Can you translate?" "Working on it now," Kelly said, her brow furrowing in concentration. "They seem to be using a combination of their language and ours. It's like they're trying to predict our moves." "Then let's give them something to predict," Alyssa said, her resolve hardening. "Prepare a decoy launch, create a false target. We'll draw them into a trap." Mason's eyes widened with understanding. "You mean bait them into thinking we're vulnerable?" "Exactly," Alyssa replied, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "While they're distracted, we hit them with everything we have." As the crew set to work, the atmosphere shifted. Each member of the Vanguard felt the stakes rise, the urgency galvanizing their efforts. The hum of machinery filled the air, punctuated by the rhythmic clattering of hands on keyboards. Alyssa took a deep breath, grounding herself. This was not just about survival. It was about reclaiming their agency, about showing the aliens that humanity would not back down. They were warriors, hard-won and resilient, forged in adversity. "Decoy launch in 5!" Kelly shouted, her voice piercing through the noise. Alyssa took her position at the command chair, her heart pounding. All hands prepare for combat. The bridge fell silent, each crew member focusing on their tasks. Alyssa felt the weight of their collective hope, fear, and determination. They were ready. 3, 2, 1, launch! The decoy shot into the void, its thrusters flaring. Moments later, the sensors blared, detecting incoming vessels converging on the false target. Alyssa's pulse quickened. The aliens were predictable, and she would use that to their advantage. Now, fire at will, she commanded. The Vanguard erupted with energy, its weapons systems lighting up the darkness of space. Bolts of energy shot forth, striking the lead alien ship, which had turned its attention away from them. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Alyssa knew this was just the beginning. The remaining ships adjusted course, returning fire. The Vanguard rocked violently as hits registered across their shields. Shields holding at 70%. Mason called out, his hands deftly navigating controls. We can withstand a few more hits, but we need to take them out quickly. Target their command ship, Alyssa directed. If we take out their leader, the rest will falter. She felt the weight of the crew's gazes, their faith in her fueling her determination. They had come this far. They were not going to let fear dictate their fate. As they adjusted their trajectory, another energy blast collided with their ship, throwing Alyssa against her seat. Alarms blared, the ship shuddering under the strain. She steadied herself, determination hardening her resolve. Status! She yelled, fighting to keep her focus amid the chaos. Shields are down to 50%. Liara shouted, her voice laced with urgency. We need to get out of this firefight or we're done for. Keep firing, Alyssa commanded. We've come too far to back down now. The tension mounted, each explosion a reminder of what was at stake. They were humanity's last line of defense against a relentless enemy, and every decision counted. As the battle raged on, Alyssa's thoughts turned toward what victory would mean, not just for them, but for all of humanity. The moment was upon them, and they had to seize it. With a final surge of adrenaline, she called out, All power to forward shields! Let's finish this! The crew responded with fervor, and Alyssa felt the energy in the air shift. This was their fight. And they would not lose.